Now, I would like to preempt this video by saying that I know everyone in God's green earth has been doing a video about this subject recently. I've seen plenty in my recommendeds, and I thought, hey, why not ride off the coattails of all these folks and butt in with my 2 cents? Into a conversation I was not invited, but I will act like I'm an expert about anyways. Because the truth is, I find this sudden shift in perspective about this game to be intriguing. Once known as one of the more popular games, only to now get looked at with a much more critical eye. It happens with games all the time, but I find it so interesting how quickly this happened, and how it likely is happening in preparation for the Sister Location remake or reimagining coming out soon. What am I talking about? Well, I am talking about Five Nights at Freddy's 5, also known as Sister Location. Sister Location itself is a divisive game, even if it only recently just started getting re-examined. What do I mean? Well, Sister Location was a point where Fnaf took a lot of specific directions. It's where the gameplay got a little more experimental, it's when the story started to deviate into more sci-fi elements, and it's also notoriously where William Afton was introduced and migrated into the center of the universe. It's no wonder that people might have had feelings about the game. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to basically give you an overview of Sister Location leading up to the release, all that jazz. Then I will tackle the gameplay, my thoughts on the gameplay, story, what I think of the story, final thoughts, etc, etc. Let's start with Sister Location's beginnings. Now, I might have hallucinated this, but I vaguely recall Scott saying at some point that Sister Location was supposed to originally be its own game in the Fnaf universe, but unconnected to the original 4 games. Unlike the post where he says the box changed contents, I couldn't find this one, but considering how different Sister Location is from those first 4 games, I can believe that might have been the initial intention, especially with how Fnaf 4 was touted as the final chapter for a while. Sister Location was teased preemptively in 2 games, Fnaf 4 and Fnaf World, though the latter was much more direct than the former. In Fnaf 4, the crying child encounters a group of children hanging out outside of Observation Room 1, aka assumedly Fredbear's family diner. They resemble the animatronics in Sister Location, though you wouldn't notice unless you had gotten familiar with them already. There's a girl with orange pigtails, green eyes, and wearing orange and red clothes who resembles Baby. This has been speculated to be Elizabeth Afton, who I'll get into later, but they don't actually match up. More so, I think this is a direct hint towards Baby. There's a girl with squinted eyes T-posing above some little dolls. Her dark blue and pink color scheme and pose seem to be a nod towards Ballora. There's also a kid holding a plush Bonnie doll that seems to be a reference to Plush Trap, but it could also be a reference to Funtime Freddy, who has Bonbon mounted to his arm. There's no child for Funtime Foxy, unless this teen lying down laughing is him, but he actually looks like one of the bullies. Fnaf World contains a proper teaser at the end of the Halloween update where a man at a desk, likely Scott, it's been assumed to be Henry, but that doesn't actually make sense with the context introduced in Sister Location, claims he created something awful. We then see eyes and hear Baby's voice saying, "Please remain in your seats. The show will begin momentarily," before we see a blood puddle underneath the slumped desk man. The teaser for Sister Location was then released, and while there was likely some mixed reactions, I noticed mostly positive, though I do remember initially that there was some confusion and dismay about having Freddy being pushed to the back of the band and having Foxy take more of a toy Foxy mangle approach than the traditional pirate Foxy. This was before anyone knew anything about either of them, so as far as they knew, it was just voiceless bear and voiceless fox shuffling around. And then the game came out, and except for one small issue that I will address later, it mostly got a positive reception. At the time, people were way more interested in the lore and story than the gameplay itself, something that boomed after the custom night section was added and added in more cutscenes. It wasn't all positive though. Even though there was some disappointment for the change in gameplay for reasons I will cover shortly, when I say that the whole thing looked positive, that isn't to say that there wasn't some negativity. There were some people who didn't like the new direction. I'm just saying that at the time, the importance of the story left a lot of the experimental stuff to get a pass in the greater scheme. But let's discuss that gameplay, shall we? While there were some changes in mechanics, 1, 2, 3, and 4 basically had the same gameplay style. Stay in an office or a bedroom with a fan in it and look and listen for animatronics creeping up on you, then shut the doors to keep them out. Each game had its own variation. Classic doorless, luring focus, cameraless, but they all had the same general feel. But Sister Location went with a completely different format. You instead play as a technician who does various tasks at Afton Robotics' rental facility. Every night has various minigames and tasks to complete to finish out the day. The animatronics are still in pursuit, but it's more on an animatronic by animatronic basis. Without tackling the story yet, let's just go through each night. On the first night, you receive a brief introduction and leave. There's no threats, it's more just to show you around the control modules and set the atmosphere. On night 2, you have 3 separate encounters. Firstly, you hide from the Bidybabs, baby small sidekick dolls, in the small space underneath the desk. You must hold the sheet covering your hiding spot in place and not meet the eyes of the Bidybabs in the holes in the sheet. This section is relatively easy. The second involves you crawling through the Ballora gallery, quietly, while she roams around. You can hear when her music gets close and have to slow down and be careful as you edge by her. There's one moment when Ballora spins right in front of you, but this is misleading. Ballora is actually elsewhere in there and still follows you as this fake Ballora ghosts by. This section is also pretty easy as long as you're patient. If you really do crawl, she won't get you. The third encounter involves Funtime Freddy in the breaker room. You have to reset the breakers one at a time while Funtime Freddy inches closer. Resetting the breakers riles Freddy, and if you don't reset them all the way, they start to reverse themselves. So you have to use the Bonbon playback recording to keep Freddy calm while you work quickly and efficiently. This one is much more tense than the previous 2 segments and requires a good balance of patience and speed to complete. And that's the end of night 2. There's an end of night cutscene and the third night begins. Night 3 only has 2 encounters. There's also an optional baby monologue if you know to go into the Circus Gallery module. If not, you go through the Funtime Auditorium. There you have to creep past Funtime Foxy while flashing to make sure he's not too close. Occasionally you can see him appearing around you, and you have to stop and let him wander off. I'm not entirely sure how these mechanics work, such as how much the flash bothers Foxy, but I do know that I've never lost on this level. So it's basically like the Ballora gallery, slow and steady for the win. Then there's the repairing Funtime Freddy section. Well, it's less repairing and more just taking some stuff out of him. You open his plates and see his insides, and only then does the real task begin when Bonbon detaches itself and starts scampering around. You have to catch and boop him on the nose, which usually involves looking at Funtime Freddy's stomach and slowly looking up to Bonbon appearing on his shoulder before snapping up and beeping his nose. Sounds easy, right? Well, the mouse in Sister Location is not the best thing ever. I find it occasionally gets caught on the slower moving screen, so those quick motions to catch Bonbon aren't as reliable as you'd think, because it's not just a matter of patience, but patience and a sudden quick flick that you better hope lands directly on Bonbon's nose, because if you miss, Bonbon will disappear, and you might get jump scared before you get a second chance. I find this encounter obscenely annoying because of this one mechanic. And funny enough, I find it disappointing that this wasn't like an actual repair section, and that was long before Help Wanted. We didn't end up getting those until Help Wanted. But something like that would have been really cool here, and because this encounter is so short, the night feels rather stunted. You get jump scared heading through the auditorium and immediately go into Night 4. With some cool animations and creepy dolls, Night 4 of Sister Location is the worst level minigame segment gameplay element in the entirety of the Fnaf franchise. And I say this with no hyperbole. This is god-awful. This is rage-inducing. This was so bad on release that it had to be patched almost immediately. The encounter begins with you sitting through what feels like the longest baby monologue in existence. The only one that possibly feels longer is when she's embarrassing herself in Pizzeria Simulator, but this isn't much better. After you get through all of that, you, stuck in a suit, are staring out at a broken Ballora as mini Renas The little ballerinas climb up the sides of your suit. You have to shake them off while not shaking off the ones who climb into the mouth of the suit and rewind the dozen spring locks circling the sides of the screen. So, why is this so hard? Well, for one, let's welcome back our guest from the previous segment, the screen scrolling issue. You have to look all over the screen and you just aren't moving fast enough to do so. The mini-arenas practically crawl as fast as you move, and you have to wind up numerous spring locks that wind up so slowly, so incredibly slowly. Sometimes you just get bad RNG and there's a mini-arena at the top of the screen at the same time that there's one coming through the mouth. So guess what? Shake, shake, or no shake, shake, you're done for. And it always feels so long, so long. Even after patching, this section was so terribly long. I have a confession. I never beat it. I rage quit night 4 of Sister Location. So, after numerous tries on this unpatched version, I tried once on the patched version, died, and vowed I would never play this level again. Screw it. Winning won't make me feel better, it'll just make me feel like I wasted time. So I slithered my way into the game's files and edited them to jump me directly to night 5, and nothing was lost. And I mean nothing, because there isn't even any interaction with a baby after the end of this. It's just a random aside. Now we're on to night 5, the last night. This night has 2 encounters, kind of, but they work the same way and are very short. You find baby's body and have to type in a code that she gives you. If you don't type it in correctly or fast enough, you are jump scared by the amalgam Ennard, who baby is currently calling Ballora. Then you have to follow her instructions to take you to the scooping room. Forward, left, forward, stop, that sort of thing. Both of these tiny tasks are basically just a game of Simon Says spread between 2 rooms. You then arrive at the scooping room and reach the first ending. But the game is not over. There is yet another encounter and ending that can be found, but first you have to complete the Circus Baby Deliver Cupcakes minigame. This minigame can appear randomly when you die. It's a basic minigame where you cross the screen collecting power-ups to feed the numerous children. The catch is to feed all of them, there's this one upgrade you have to jump over, and if you don't, you won't have enough cupcakes. Once you reach the end, you have to grab the ice cream and rush back to the beginning of the level before the timer runs out. We'll get back to the meaning of this minigame later. But if you complete this minigame, you get a keycard that allows you to get to the private office in the Funtime auditorium. To get there, when baby tells you to head to the scooping room, you instead run forward and to the right. I don't think there's anywhere in the game that tells you to do this. In fact, the only way you'll know about the private room is if you paid attention in the Funtime Freddy encounter and took note of the breaker map. Though there are numerous extra rooms, the private office is the only one that you go to. Once you get in there, you find yourself with a 2-door office and thrown into a traditional Fnaf office segment against Ennard. While luring you with baby and someone else's voice, Ennard tries to make it through the doors and the vent. You have to watch the cameras, keep them on, and manage the power until the cleanup crew arrives. After this, you head home for one last cutscene. Now before I give you my thoughts on the gameplay, let's also cover Custom Night. Sister Location's Custom Night mode arrived in an update 2 months after release. The Custom Night involves being planted in the private office and going up against many of the Sister Location animatronics, Sand Circus Baby, and Ennard. There are preset challenges that you tackle at increasing difficulty, and after you complete enough levels, you're rewarded with a cutscene, and then another, and so on and so forth. The Custom Night is a far cry from Sister Location's basic gameplay and is much easier to access. Personally, I think it's pretty fun, though it should have been released alongside the main game. Because if there's one problem with the gameplay in Sister Location, it is that it is way too short. Yes, I get that Sister Location was more of a story-based experience, and technically the first few games weren't super long, but they had custom nights and challenges, which Sister Location was not released with. That's not to say that Sister Location's encounters aren't fun, but there's just not enough of them. Not to mention that it is also broken up by plenty of chatting cutscenes that cannot be bypassed. So replaying certain sections means committing to at least 15 to 20 minutes of waiting, just to get to the gameplay that doesn't last long at all. If you cut out all the talking, all the cutscenes, Sister Location feels like the gameplay itself could be wrapped up in 20 to 30 minutes if I'm generous. And this is a big problem because Sister Location was, I think, $8 to $10 on release. I think it was $8. Not a hefty price tag, but a notable one. Though it would be easier to overlook if the custom night had been there from the release and the whole replay issue wasn't an issue. The quality of the minigames also varies. Some of them are pretty fun and tense, like Funtime Freddy's segment, but others just kind of feel like meh in delivery. Like Crossing the Gallery and Auditorium is cool, but the Under the Desk segment, the annoying Catching Bonbon segment, the excruciating Mini Arena section, and the Simon Says section. Also, the gameplay has this weird reverse building, like you would expect that you would start off slow and then the minigames and jobs would become more and more complicated and longer. But no, Night 2 is the most filled night. Every night after it, not counting 4 for obvious reasons, feels significantly shorter and like there's less for you to do. One of the most frustrating things is that the segment against Ennard, the moment of traditional Fnaf gameplay, was locked behind playing the baby minigame, which is fine. Except on release, it was sort of difficult getting this to spawn. I think this was patched, but when I got the game, I could not get this game to spawn, and it wasn't until after one of the patches that it started to pop up. Also, like I said, getting to the room and knowing where to go and how to get there is pretty cryptic. The only hint really is the map in Freddy's section, and even then, if you're not precise on your button clicks, you're DOA. And again, replaying Ennard involves going through the entire game, as he doesn't appear in Custom Night. It's an issue. Custom Night also adds content and classic gameplay, but that can't change the fundamentals. That is, all of this makes Sister Location not a great game for replaying. So yeah, the gameplay is an issue. I can't even say it aged poorly because the situation always had flaws. Then again, I'm not saying Sister Location had bad gameplay, or that Sister Location's problem was that it deviated from FNAF's primary formula. If I can be honest, I wasn't exactly head over heels with FNAF 4's whisper and screech gameplay, and Sister Location's format was appealing to me. To do more tasks and get closer to the animatronics, there were just drawbacks in the execution. But now let's tackle the story. As I said earlier, when it came to FNAF at this time, the story was more important than the game itself, if that makes any sense. The lore was what made it so big. Remember, this wasn't long after the earth-shattering, was that the bite of 87? Because we are discussing Sister Location, I'm going to try to just discuss the story for this game as it is, with only some references to the games before it and maybe one big reference going forward, but largely just taking in what it is as its own entry. Yes, I will be addressing the elephant in the room that I mentioned earlier, but later. Sister Location opens with a cutscene involving a voiceover of a board member asking William Afton about some of the enhancements inside of his creation, Circus Baby. William Afton lists off her party tricks before the member cryptically interjects and says those are not what he means. The game then cuts to us going down the elevator. From the marked hand unit, we play as a technician named Mike, likely a reference to Mike from FNAF 1. He is a new hire at Circus Baby's Rentals, and this is his first day. The hand unit foretells him about his job and cracks some dark jokes, but I won't be going into it much because it's a little long-winded and unimportant. Pretty much most of the hand unit's dialogue could be taken out of the game and nothing would be lost. Mike and us get to see how Circus Baby's is run. Basically, the animatronics are frequently given controlled shocks to keep them in line, even when they aren't doing anything. Circus Baby herself receives the brunt of these shocks, even though we cannot see into her enclosure at all. Now, that doesn't mean that the animatronics don't get a little quirky, but this goes to antagonize them even before we've met them. Mike heads home at the end of his shift and watches his vampire soap opera. The next day, Mike returns and goes along with his daily tasks of torturing the animatronics before heading into the Circus Gallery control module. This is when there's a power failure. While the hand unit tries to reset the system, another voice speaks up in its place. This is none other than Circus Baby herself, who muses on why Mike has taken the job. On a quick aside, Sister Location was the first game where the animatronics got voices and fully distinct personalities, by which I mean the ones who spoke were very differential in how they acted in contrast to the earlier bots, which were haunted but silent. I will delve further into Circus Baby later, but if I can give a brief description of each animatronic's personality, Baby is calm, quiet, and intelligent. Funtime Freddy is loud, brash, and sadistic. Ballora is solemn, elegant, and sinister. Bonbon, the Bidybabs, and the Mini-Renas are mischievous and sneaky, and Funtime Foxy doesn't have any. This was a humongous step in the direction of Fnaf, and before I discuss execution and everything else, let me just say that this was the right step to take. Fnaf got popular because of its animatronic characters. Sure, the fanbase adopted human characters like the Night Guards, but it was Freddy's big face that drew people in from the get-go. So adding on to make the bots have more going for them, more than metal zombies, was an inevitable and much appreciated step, though how it was handled varies in execution throughout the series. But back to the story. Baby warns Mike that he needs to hide, which he does in a hiding spot under the desk. The Bidybabs arrive and try to get in before noticing Baby and getting scared off. Baby then warns Mike that the hand unit will tell him to head into the breaker room and that if he follows its advice, he will be killed, and instead forewarns him on how to safely progress. Indeed, the hand unit sends Mike across the Ballora gallery, during which Ballora circles around like a dreidel, and then after the hand unit nearly exposes him, Mike makes it into the breaker room. Funtime Freddy's just chilling out in there and starts getting agitated when Mike resets the power, but he uses Bonbon lures to dissuade him long enough to finish up and leave. On his way out, he hears Ballora speculating that someone might be there, but she does not follow. Mike heads home to watch more soaps. The next day, Mike is tasked to head through the Funtime Auditorium into parts and service to repair Funtime Freddy, but before that you can choose to go into the Circus module and under the desk to hear Baby tell you his story. I'm just going to assume that this is the more canon route. Baby tells Mike about how she was on stage once at a party, counting children and having a good time, when one of the children approached her alone and she suddenly lost control of her body, grabbing the child who was trapped inside of her. There was screaming for a moment, but nobody heard it, and the child was killed. Baby seems ignorant to what happened, at least at this moment. Mike then heads through the Funtime Auditorium where he must dodge Funtime Foxy. Does, and arrives at parts and service where he deactivates and removes Funtime Freddy and Bonbon's power sources. On his way out, he is jump-scared by Funtime Foxy and the night ends. Mike then awakens, trapped in a suit where Baby, now sounding much more sinister, starts talking to him, low-key threatening him, directly threatening him by putting him in the dangerous suit and pretty much blowing her cover as the villain. Funny, she talks about how well she pretends, but in this moment she totally exposes her hand. Anyway, Ballora is brought into parts and service by two technicians and then sent into the scooping room where Mike is. The audience and Mike then watches Ballora is scooped before their very eyes. Baby then opens the faceplates and warns Mike to manage the spring locks under someone until someone reaches him, all while Mini-Renas climb on him. So if I may, real big shock, but Night 4 isn't just a disaster gameplay-wise, but a total derailing of the plot. But I digress. Mike goes home and decides to come back to his final night for some reason. He finds Circus Baby in the parts and service room where she tells Mike that she needs to be destroyed, that there's something evil inside of her, and warns him about Ballora sneaking around. He does as Baby says and then heads to the scooping room. It is there that the truth is revealed. Baby has been plotting against you and Mike the whole time. A shocking twist, if not for Night 4. All of the animatronics have been scooped and have combined into the one form, Ennard. They reveal that they have done this before, and will do it again too, if need be, but they need you to help in their final escape. They are going to scoop Mike and escape into the real world using his body. Mike stands there and accepts his fate, and is scooped. We then see a scene of Mike looking into his mirror, and glowing purple eyes and no-joke Rick Astley's shadow stares back at him. The game ends. Unless you go for the other ending. Now let's discuss that Baby minigame. In reality, Baby's minigame fills in the rest of the Circus Baby story from Night 3. You deliver all of the cupcakes, find the ice cream, and return to the beginning of the stage. And a girl approaches. Before she can take the ice cream, she is grabbed by a claw and dragged into Baby's belly. The Ennard Boss fight adds context to this scene, so let me just sum it up. The little girl from the story and minigame is Elizabeth Afton, the daughter of William Afton, though she is not named in this game. Throughout the nights we hear her voice in between them, begging her father to see Baby, but being denied even though William claimed that he built her for her. In reality, from the blueprints, we know William built Baby and her bandmates to kidnap and slaughter kids, and he did not want her to get close because if she was alone with Baby, her programming would activate. But during a party, William neglected to watch Elizabeth, and she got close to Baby, who waited until the children were all gone before luring her in with ice cream. Then she grabbed her with her claw, dragged her into her stomach hatch, and killed her. It is clear that Baby is possessed by Elizabeth. In the most direct way, Baby's eyes are blue until Elizabeth's death, and then Baby's eyes turn green, like Elizabeth's were. If we ever saw them in the game. In Sister Location, she acts as though Elizabeth is a separate person and uses her as bait, though considering the fact that she is clearly haunted, I think we can assume there's more going on here. Afton wasn't focused on building lifelike AI, he wanted robotic kitty killers. Current Baby is a byproduct. So, that in mind, when Mike gets into the private office and confronts with Ennard, Ennard starts begging him to let them in, to stop fighting, and uses Elizabeth to bait him, even using her voice to try to coax him to open the door. This is because they believe that Mike is Will. Mike survives the night and heads home, finishing up his soap opera as Ennard crawls inside, like they lost both of their legs on the way out of Afton's. The end. This is the fake ending, as revealed by the big fake ending sign that can be seen if you brighten up the credits. If only all FNAF games were so direct. But we're not done yet. It should be noted that while we are listed as Mike, with the hinting of us being William in the Ennard boss fight, it wasn't until custom night that it was confirmed that, in fact, the Silver Eyes was out by now, so at this point we knew that William Afton had worked as a security guard under a fake name. So, Mike being just a fake name for William Afton, when we did know that Mike had been working at the same places where William Afton was killing kids, it was at this time a possibility, because this was the first time we ever knew Michael Afton existed. But I digress again. So, it wasn't until custom night that it was confirmed that we weren't Will, but Michael Afton. Speaking of which, the custom night cutscenes. Cue the Jaws music. One after another, we see cutscenes of Mike's body, puppeteered by Ennard, slowly decomposing until it turns the same purple color as the Purple Man from the earlier games. This is just a coincidence, so if you're thinking maybe the original Purple Man was actually Baby's band disguised as a human and killing kids as it was designed to do, nah. There's actually just one Purple Man and one man who's often depicted in the same shade of purple. At the end of the road, Mike ejects Ennard and collapses, only to hear Baby's voice reminding him that he won't die. Resurrected by spite, we get a final cutscene where Michael himself is revealed to be Michael Afton, and he is now coming after his father. We then see a dramatic shot of Springtrap from FNAF 3 lurching forward. And no, even though we saw the Purple Man go in Springtrap, and then saw Springtrap lurch like he was going to find someone lining up with Michael Afton's voice, that's the other purple guy. Okay, before I go into this story, let me just get this out of the way. This Purple Man Springtrap thing was the first instance of FNAF having trouble telegraphing what it wanted to say. The series relied up until that point on the minigames explaining the story through context clues, so to suddenly give out context clues like these, not for them to mean anything, but just for, I suppose, irony, it was an issue that did get worse when later entries, but that's not important here. Let's really get into Sister Location's actual story, because like I said earlier, this was the reason for the game. That is why it was prioritized so heavily over the gameplay. So, did it work? Well, like all things, there were highs and lows. The shining star of Sister Location, and really the main core of the game, is Circus Baby herself, as she really should be. Circus Baby was FNAF's first whack at a more complex character, and the series' first full animatronic villain. I wouldn't really count Springtrap because he was introduced as the Purple Man, a human first and foremost. And when he became Springtrap, he retained a lot of human behavior compared to the other animatronics, which is a good thing, but it doesn't mean that Baby is distinct. While Afton's story is explained in Sister Location, Baby is introduced as her own kind of villain. See, in the earlier games, you were surviving these haunted animatronics, and while they were antagonists, they were not villains. They were victims of Freddy's and the purple guy, so they technically weren't solely the bad guys. Baby gave a voice to the anger of those souls trapped in those animatronic bodies. But while her personality is caustic and manipulative, her behavior is borderline unforgivable, and her karma's as black as Afton's charred soul. While Baby is still very much a villain, not an antagonist alone, she is still a victim. She is still the result of someone else's cruel and negligent behavior, and the fact that she leads you on the entire game to use you was a unique twist at the time. Before everyone started doing it. That being said, if I may make a comment on how the story is delivered, Baby gets a little too much time slowly chewing the air. Too much of the game relies on her talking and talking about stuff that doesn't matter. And I don't mean the story in Night 3, that's important contextual dialogue that gives front row seats to an event that kickstarted a lot of what's going on here. It also gives us Baby's take on said event. But that scene on Night 4 where Baby reveals her true behavior is not well done. First of all, like I said earlier, it absolutely blows Baby's cover, and she never acts like that again. In the private room section with Ennard, they are manipulative and pleading, and that fits dead on with Baby's Night 3 story where she pretends she doesn't know what happened. Night 4 is a long-winded deviation that breaks pacing just so it can shoehorn in a scene from the books, a scene that didn't even involve Baby, mind you. I'm talking about that scene where William traps Carlton into his springlock suit and spends a long time just telling him about it. That scene. And it's especially hard to take it seriously in Night 4, especially when you've listened before. It just feels too direct and could have had a few lines shaved down to make it less... that feeling when you want to yell, come on, skip the previews, let's get to the feature. That. So yeah, Baby's done well, but the pacing surrounding her isn't all sunshine and rainbows. Half of her dialogue could have been cut, and we probably would have gotten to the same point. Baby herself plays well into the main themes of Sister Location. And I don't just mean finding your sister at a location. The actual themes of the story would be about familial obligation, distrust and betrayal in family units, and how the decisions of parents can trickle down to their child's future. This might seem overdramatic, but if you think about it, it does make sense. William Afton is shown to be negligent, a repulsive human being, in slaughtering dozens of children. And before you try to argue that William began killing out of revenge for his kids dying, his favorite daughter was killed by a machine that he made to kill children. It was by his own actions that she suffered, and then continued to suffer in a facility he created. As was it by his own direction that Michael suffered. He sent him down there in his place to get Baby, and then Michael received the fate the animatronics intended to sick on William, as claimed by their and Michael's own words. He's also a perpetual liar. White lies like telling Elizabeth that Baby was made for her, to massive lies like sending Michael in to do his dirty work. We don't know what he told Michael, but I doubt he told him about this. Not with his track record. Elizabeth and Michael are innocents until William's poisonous influence spreads to them, and so they are infected as well. Baby's aggression and behavior is all by William's design, whether it be the fact that she was built to kill or that she is possessed by his daughter. Michael is coerced into going down there and has his body and life irreparably ruined. This is likely why Michael is made purple, to show this effect. I mean, unfortunately, the context clue might have been a little unintendedly confusing, but I digress yet again. Point is, Fnaf frequently plays around with the ideas of the responsibility parents have over what happens to their children, but this is really the only time in the franchise that it really tackles the cause and effect. And that also means that really, Sister Location was the first game with a story theme. Fnaf 1-3 had a more direct story that really didn't have the opportunity to present a theme, largely because of the distance between the audience and the characters. Fnaf 4 was a little more up close and personal, but there really wasn't a theme. Child suffers, child suffers, child suffers, child dies. In that regard, Sister Location pulled off something that no other game before it had done, and I mean no other Fnaf game had done, and that was have a storyline that directly hinged on its major character. As for the other animatronics, none of them really got as much story relevance as Baby, but they do stand out. Especially Funtime Freddy, who was the first Freddy to speak and comes off as so unabashedly threatening and loving every moment of it. As for Mike himself, we do technically get more about him in this game, but we don't really get much personality-wise. I mean, we know that he likes popcorn and he likes soap operas, but we never see him hear or react to anything. He's dead inside even before Ennard got in. Though, if I can talk on the greater scheme of things before we hit the elephant in the room we're careening towards, I will say that segment of Mike's body breaking down and then the whole "I was the villain's child the whole time and now I've got to stop him" reveal was, oh yeah, definitely the jumping the shark moment. And I'm not saying that was a bad plot point either, but if there was a moment when that Fonz jumped, it was there. I remember my first reaction was like, oh my god, but not, oh my god, but oh my god. Not quite salty, but more like, I don't foresee this going too well. To counter that, Sister Location had a really cool red herring that I fell for twice, and it involves Ennard. Leading up to the release, there were source code hints that talked about rental scheduling, and it was then that a 5th out-of-service animatronic was teased. Soon afterwards, we got a partial look at Ennard, which from the angle made him look like a head attached to a spaghetti body, which is not too different from what we got. So, you get teased a secret 5th animatronic, out of service, and then Ennard's head. So, you expect that 5th animatronic will be Ennard. Except then comes Night 4, where Ballora is damaged and her eye resembles Ennard's from the teasers. Then, when you run into Ennard on Night 5, Baby calls it Ballora, so you start to believe Ennard is just a broken Ballora. Only to later be revealed that he's an amalgam of all the animatronics. This is the first time we really see Ennard's full body, mask included. This makes for 2 misleads, one that you'll only see if you know the source code teasers and the more direct Ballora one. This is kinda cool if you're paying attention. I remember I was intrigued about the 5th animatronic, disappointed when it was just Ballora, and then intrigued again with proper Ennard's eventual introduction. It was a neat twist. All in all, Sister Location's story might have had some kinks, but it was a bigger scope and a much more direct story to tell. It wasn't just silent minigames. The game goes out of its way to have that beat-by-beat structure. Mike goes to the business, sees what's up, meets Baby, has some encounters with Baby, Night 4, the final night, the reveal, the clicking together of puzzle pieces between Night 3's story, the minigame, and the end of night Elizabeth voice lines to put together this more fleshed out tale. And where it works, there's no denying that. In fact, unlike the gameplay that has significant issues, the story issues are outweighed by what it does right. Sister Location's story carries the experience, and whether or not that makes it worth its price point really depends on how much you enjoy that story. But that's probably not why you're here. Enough delay, time to draw back from Sister Location's story and deal with the bigger issue. Since Sister Location was the game where the series turned more sci-fi, the turning point of the series, was it the nail in the coffin that led to the story issues we have in current games? The hot and cold issues with villains and emulation to Afton, and the fixation with Afton, the draw away from classic animatronics to robots, the switch from hauntings to scientific-based assertions of alchemy, but less like Nine and more like Jimmy Neutron, whatever that means. Sister Location set the groundwork for all of this. Except it didn't. While Sister Location did invite the more sci-fi elements and brought into the games the further, what I can only call serialization of Afton, the decisions of recent Fnaf cannot all be put on one game, realistically. Yes, it expanded on Afton, but Afton's return and rebrand and fair weather followers were all decisions made in following games. Yes, it was more sci-fi, but Fnaf really didn't buckle down into the whole futuristic thing until Security Breach. Help Wanted could have arguably been in modern day, but Security Breach is in a future where robots are standard and bears are extinct. Sister Location had a sci-fi feel, but at their roots they were still animatronics performing at parties. And yes, I said Custom Night with the jumping the shark moment, but how the series handles itself after jumping the shark is entirely on it, not the shark itself. Often the term relates to the moment when things in a series changed, and while I agree it was this moment, that doesn't mean that Sister Location is the reason it happened. Because in the end, Sister Location was the beginning of a new chapter, and it was what happened after that where things wobbled. And as for the weird stuff involving androids and misleads, more William drama, convoluted plot points, look towards the books. Not only is Sister Location's Baby a far cry from her book counterpart, but it was Pizzeria Simulator that made the book's required reading to understand two name-dropped main characters. If anything, I'd say that the game that really shifted the tone of Fnaf was Pizzeria Simulator, especially since the main jumping the shark moment wasn't the scooping in Sister Location, but the revelations in Custom Night, which were a direct teaser for the next game. To blame Sister Location, you might as well blame Fnaf World for teasing Sister Location. My main point is that Sister Location's story has good points, but it has some rough execution. Does improve in some places, and admittedly might have laid the groundwork for problems in the FNAF story following, but it alone does not lead to these issues. After all, Sister Location ends when it ends. Anything that comes after it is no longer it. Now, where to next? Well, this may seem like a weird place, but let's discuss the atmosphere, location, and designs of the animatronics. This all goes hand in hand with the gameplay and story, so I decided to give it its own section. I probably should have given it an earlier section, but it's too late now. I've committed to my decision. Sister Location is the most sci-fi themed of the FNAF games, even though it takes place before 1993. The animatronics are chrome-plated robots. The facility looks more like an underground spaceship than a rental factory, with clean tile floors stretching on into darkness and the delightfully desolate scooping room. Even in Security Breach, a game that actually takes place in the future, the amusement park theming of everything grounds it into modern day. Sister Location takes place in the past, but it feels like it takes place in the distant future. The whole building is sterile and cold, and unlike the dreary but nostalgic Freddy's, is unwelcoming, like an empty hospital, which makes sense with a horror game. Our tasks also take us to various rooms, not just one office, but up and down and around this floor of the complex, so we get a good look at it. So it would seem. Unfortunately, there's a catch to the whole no longer stuck in an office thing, and that's that we can't see most of it. Ballora's gallery and the Funtime auditorium are pitch dark, which plays into the minigames. Where it doesn't play into the minigames is in the Circus gallery, a large room in the northern section of the map where Baby resides. We never see this room, and we never see a complete Baby. And perhaps this is to suggest Baby was never fully there in her body, as we hear movements as early as Night 1 around the complex, but it's kinda disappointing to have so much of the map be pitch dark. At least with the cameras in FNAF 1, 2, and 3, you can realistically see the entire building, with 4 being the outlier, but also you do see a pretty good amount of the house. But what we can see is neat. It has its ups and downs, and in the end, it's more a preference thing than anything else. I like the look of the rental company complex. It really is sort of a cool final boss location, but I wouldn't really say that I like it more than traditional Freddy's. It feels a little more detached, if you get my drift. And that's what it comes down to, really, in the end. Like FNAF 4 takes us out of Freddy's into a home, Sister Location takes us out of Freddy's into this factory. It's really a matter of taste whether or not you like or dislike this direction. But the location itself at least fits in with the vibes of robot creation and conception, a theme prominent in Sister Location. The same goes for the designs of the animatronics. There's no doubt they are a step in a different direction when it comes to FNAF. The scare factor is shifted from uncomfortable garish suits to dangerous machines. They're clean and pristine, and the only time they truly are scary isn't due to eyes rolling in their heads or pieces falling apart, but opening their faces to reveal sharp and dangerous bits underneath. To make things a little more direct, the original FNAF animatronics, not counting FNAF 4, are scary in what they are and do. And the Sister Location animatronics are scary in what they are and can do to you. It's different. Not bad, not more or less scary, but different. And I feel like the Funtime animatronics designs show both the positives and negatives of these changes. Starting on Baby herself. She is an odd case. I do love Baby's design. I love that she's so big, huge, 7 feet tall. I always emphasize that. This is a 7-foot-tall clown. I love that she's so cute and uncanny, but we don't see her do anything in the game. Our only time with her is when we see her shell in Night 5, and even then, we don't get jump scared by her, and due to the up-close and personal nature of it, we don't really get a good feel of her size. Baby's design is effective, as shown in Help Wanted and Fnaf AR, it just isn't utilized in Sister Location, which, considering what I said earlier about how Baby is so important to the story, it is disappointing. I feel like this could have been remedied best by seeing Baby through the windows when she talks to us. That way, we could have seen her size, we see her staring through the glass at us, be uncomfortable, but still, it would not give away that she's not helping us. We would get that feeling like we can't trust Baby, but less because Baby directly gives us a reason to not trust her, and more just the vibe of having this huge creature eyeing us through the window. The best example of how scary these animatronics can be is Ballora. Ballora might look pretty and elegant, but her design is especially uncanny. From the stiffness in how she moves, to the moment we see her torn apart on her stage, to the sections where her face opens up, that's the main draw. Ballora's lovely face gives the innate fear of what's hiding underneath even before it opens, and then it splits apart and you see small human-sized eyes and a gaping mouth of teeth. It really works. While we don't see much of her, choosing her for moments like the accursed Night 4, where she just stares at us while we're getting actively tortured, was a really good call. I like the mini-arenas and I like their designs, but in hindsight, they don't really make sense to the theming of the game. All the animatronics are plated, futuristic-looking, state-of-the-art robot designs, but then these are styled after artist models, those wooden kind. They still look good, but it is a peculiar decision, one that probably isn't as noticeable as I'm making it out to be. Funtime Freddy is an interesting case because his design isn't nearly as impressive as Baby and Ballora's, but he makes up for it with his assertive personality. Funtime Foxy resembles this as well, but doesn't have that same amount of character. Though, what he does have is a scene in the auditorium where you can see her head twitching and spasming in the camera flash, which is notably creepy. Freddy doesn't get that. The closest thing is the false jump scare when you open his plating to remove his battery pack. I would say that physically Funtime Foxy is creepier but lacks in character, while Funtime Freddy is swimming in character and lacking in spooky factor. Though both of these guys sort of pale in comparison in design compared to like Ballora. The Bidybabs, the Bonbon hand puppet, they're both serviceable. They're cute enough, not necessarily scary, though Bonbon's sunken eyes are a little more effective when up close and personal. There's also two secret, well-known and much-beloved characters, Lolbit and Yendo. Lolbit being a recolored Funtime Foxy appearing as a mask in the control module sometimes, and on the TV screens in Custom Night, while Yendo is a large bear endoskeleton with yellow eyes. While I can understand why Lolbit's design is so appealing, I didn't really feel like either of these characters left much of an impact on me. Likely because they really are there and gone in the blink of an eye. And, I didn't see either of them in my first playthrough. In fact, the only reason I'm mentioning them at all is because someone reminded me in the comments. I'm not going to say that they're like useless characters or anything, because obviously they've left an impact on people. The music of Sister Location is pretty effective. Most of the tracks have been reused and remixed in further games and fit the dreary and hollow theme of the Cold Factory. There's also lighter tunes like the Baby Minigame theme, Turtle Crusher, and the casual Bongos theme. Like FNAF World before it too, Sister Location doesn't include any stock music and has its own total complete soundtrack. Well, I think that about covers it for the feel of the game. Time for my final thoughts, my too long didn't read of the video. What do I think about Sister Location? Sister Location is a good but flawed game with a strong story that delivers FNAF's first instance of some of their major reoccurring themes, but is held back by lacking gameplay and an imbalance in the way dialogue and cutscenes are delivered. Heck, on the story spectrum, this is pretty much one of the only FNAF games with a largely self-contained story. That is, all of the major story beats are included in the story, for it to make sense. All of the background required, such as the story of Elizabeth, is both introduced in this game and revealed in an entertaining way. It could have been so easy to make the trauma behind Baby be the missing children incident again, but that didn't happen. The replayability in Sister Location is shot, and the best experience with it is going in blind and playing through the whole thing in one sitting, post Night 4 patch. Trying to play back through for specific minigames only makes some of the long periods of waiting much more apparent. Though on that first go, those moments can be effectively tense. It kind of really is a one-and-done experience if you don't count the custom night. The custom night you can go back and replay all you want. But for the main game, the first playthrough is a solid experience that only forms cracks during replays. In plenty of ways, Sister Location does hold up, and just in other ways it can't. As for it being the reason that Fnaf's story has had issues and the franchise has had problems, while some of Sister Location's issues and beats may relate to the problems that came after it, it's not all Sister Location's fault. Story-wise, Sister Location did add in things like a wider backstory on Afton, greater character focus, and a nudge into a more sci-fi and alchemical magical theme. But Sister Location pulled it off well enough. Sister Location Custom Night was technically the jumping the shark moment, but it can't be held accountable for what came later, as it really didn't do anything too egregious. Sure, the body-snatching plot could be seen as a stretch, but it does play into the haunting elements of the original Fnaf games. So while Sister Location was the turning point, I can't blame it for what came later. I blame Pizza Simulator for what came later, but I digress. Yet again. Though the gameplay is fun overall, save specific intervals, there's just not enough of it. The characters did show a lot of promise, we just didn't have all of them totally utilized to their full potential. That's proven alone by their future appearances. Baby and Ennard returning in the original Help Wanted and the Fnaf AR appearances. It goes to show that these were actually some pretty cool characters, but they just didn't get enough time. Throughout this whole video, I came to a weird conclusion. I used to consider Sister Location one of my favorite Fnaf games up until I got to the end of the gameplay section, but while looking harder at Sister Location made me take off those rose-colored glasses, I think it's more nuanced than just, I liked it and now I'm looking at it critically and I don't. I don't think it's possible to have the same experience with it as I did the first time I played the game by design. But that doesn't mean it aged poorly. That just means this is an experience that really does peak on its first playthrough. And with that in mind, I think Sister Location is still one of my favorites, and is a pretty solid game, warts and all. This game is the reason Baby is one of my favorite Fnaf characters, despite how her story progressed after it. And to say it's one of the worst games is a little bit of an exaggeration. Flawed, yes, I've been repeating that word plenty of times. Flawed. But nowhere are its flaws greater than some other games. It has pacing issues, but not the worst pacing issues. It lacks gameplay, but it doesn't have bad gameplay. All that jazz. The truth is, this video really kind of is a defense of Sister Location. I've seen a lot of people going either way, but as more criticism gets directed at the game, some of which it rightly deserved, I do see some of it that isn't deserved, such as the whole debate on whether or not this was the game that led Fnaf down the path it took. That's not the case. All Sister Location did was step out of Fnaf's comfort zone with mixed success. If it hadn't, Fnaf would have quickly stagnated. It needed something new. That doesn't mean everything worked, but it does mean that looking at Sister Location as when Fnaf took a step in a new direction, instead of when Fnaf drove right off the rails, even if it might mean the same thing, is a better way to look at it. Though I can honestly see why someone going into this being told that this is the best Fnaf game, or just a really good game in general, might be disappointed. This is really the sort of entry that is best gone into with no expectations, so you can come out with your own feelings on it. But only if you just ignore that Night 4 ever happened. Maybe someday I'll discuss what I think is the real catalyst of FNAF's changes, being Pizzeria Simulator. But for now, thank you for watching.